Chapter 9. Dunstan and Tully walked down the corridor towards the entry of Dock D6, loudly discussing station politics. When they turned the corner to the dock, they would be in a position to see any guard who might be present. Dunstan signalled to Ripley, Wilks and Falk, who were following. No guard. Wilks was close enough to see Tully pull a small keyboard from her pack and plug it into a panel set in the wall. She crouched down and quickly began to punch in codes. I don't know. I mean, it's one thing to say you're going to upgrade the conditions, but they've been saying that since I got here. Wilks and the others continued slowly towards the door while Tully checked for monitors. Dunstan droned on about the quality of the food served in the dining halls. According to the deck layout in the computer, there wouldn't be any guard at this point. Ripley had insisted on a double check. Tully looked up, grinning. Clear, she said quietly. Wilks felt himself loosened slightly. It was crucial to go unnoticed for as long as possible in order to get past the guard ships. Once an alarm was sounded, their chances fell damn fast. The Kurtz was docked outside D6. To get to it, they needed to open 3 doors. This one, the entry to the airlock, and the ship itself. All were computer coded, and the complexity of the entry systems usually meant no human guards, a major selling point for their choice of transport. They would get into the loading room and call in the rest of the crew. Captain McQuaid's voice print would be the key to the Kurtz. A licensed military pilot and the proper codes were all they needed to get on board. The codes Leslie and Tully had rascaled up with little trouble. Maybe too little. While Tully set up her portable, Wilks moved to the nearest comm to raise Billie and the others. They were waiting in Brewster's quarters. The Marines had taken all of the carbines and grenades from the armory they could carry, signing them out with General Peters' personal access code. Wilks had laughed when Leslie had suggested using the General's code. Looked like Peters had helped us after all. Wilks walked quickly down D corridor to a public comm and tapped in Brewster's number. Yeah. Hey Brewster, it's Wilks. Why don't you pop on over and have a drink? Sounds great. Meet you at the bar. Wilks discommed and walked back down the empty hall. So far, so good. Billie and the Marines would be there in 2 minutes, or less, barring complications, and then they would be on their way. Hey! Came a voice from behind them. Wilks stopped and turned around. A burly young man in a security uniform approached him slowly, face grim. His hand rested lightly on the butt of his stunner. Where do you think you're going? Brewster nodded at the other Marines, and they stood, picking up assorted wrapped bundles. Weapons, ammo, various tools. No one spoke. Billie went to help Jones with his equipment, a few bags of med supplies and a small diagnostic unit. He smiled at her, teeth bright against his chocolate-coloured skin. Guess we're about to be outlaws, he said. He looked nervous. Billie returned his smile. You get used to it after a while, she said. Besides, you already are an outlaw. Conspiracy. Adcox went first as scout. She carried nothing and would walk half a minute ahead of the others. Brewster and McQuaid went next. Billie counted silently to 10. Carvey and Moto stepped out. Finally, Billie and Jones walked to the door. Billie's heart pounded, and she felt a tiny trickle of sweat run between her breasts in spite of the cool air. Amy, she thought. They stepped out into the corridor. Wilks smiled at the guard. I'm trying to find a biolab, D2. Isn't it down here? The guard seemed to relax slightly, but didn't smile back. Wrong direction. The labs are back that way, he said, pointing behind them. And go left at the first tee. Wilks shook his head, still smiling. Thanks. The guard nodded and stepped past him, headed towards D6, where the others would be waiting for Wilks. Are you sure it's not to the right? Said Wilks loudly, when he had gotten but a few paces away. Yeah, I'm sure. Now, because I went left before, I think. And I think it's right. I mean, headed back to the lifts is right. Right? He spoke in what he hoped was a stupid but friendly tone, and he hoped the others would hear him. The guard turned and moved closer to Wilks, as if proximity would somehow make his answer plainer. Look, go back. When you get to the tee, go left. Left. Got it? Left. Got it. The guard shook his head, and distracted by Wilkes's stupidity, just as Wilks hoped he would be, he walked away from D6. Which was good, since otherwise Wilks would have had to take him out. Wilks let out a breath and waited for a few seconds before heading back. They were grouped in front of the door, all except for Falk. The large man stepped out from behind a turn farther down the hall, obviously prepared to deal with any interruptions. They had heard him working the guard. Tully had her finger on the entry button and was waiting for the go. Ripley arched an eyebrow at Wilks. Let's do it, he said. But before Tully could move, the door slid open. A man in a worker's coverall stood there, holding what looked like a weapon. Billie and Jones walked down the hall side by side, not speaking. They came to the first turn, and Billie caught a glimpse of Moto and Carvey as they turned the corner ahead. She relaxed slightly. Everything seemed to be working as planned, so far. She wondered how Ripley's team was doing. Dunstan stepped forward, as if to greet the surprised worker. The mechanical device apparently wasn't a weapon. The man dropped it and raised clenched hands, mouth set. He was surprised, but obviously combative. They weren't supposed to be here, and he knew it. Dunstan reached out, holding his hand so the backs of his wrists faced the worker. Ripley saw the man blink, confused. The martial arts teacher moved forward quickly on his right foot, almost crouching. He flicked his fingers at the man's eyes. The worker raised his arms to cover his face and Dunstan dropped flat onto the deck, did something fast with his legs. The worker squawked once, fell, hit the deck hard. Wilks dropped and clapped a hand over the man's mouth, but the guy wasn't moving. Apparently, he'd hit his head and was out cold. It all happened in the space of a few breaths. Nice move, Wilks said. No one else inside now, Dunstan said. But hurry, somebody's coming. Billie and the doctor were almost to the dock when they heard footsteps running towards them. Billie froze, laying her free hand on the doctor's arm. He stopped and looked at her, his own dark features a mask of anxiety. She felt as though time had slowed to a crawl, but excuses ran through her head at lightning speed. We're on our way to a medical emergency. I'm assisting, he's a doctor. We're teaching a class? Adcox appeared in front of them, out of breath. Billie and Jones let out a shuddery sigh in unison, but the lieutenant's expression was frantic. She grabbed one of their bags. Trouble, she said, and turned back towards the dock. Billie fell in beside Char and Jones at a jog. Adcox hadn't wasted any more air by telling them what had happened, and Billie didn't ask. They would find out soon enough. Wilks dragged the worker inside before turning to Dunstan. Who's coming? He said. Another worker. How? Wilks started to ask Dunstan how he could possibly know, if he had some extrasensory flash or something, when he saw the evidence himself. There was a table in one corner of the large room where the downed man had evidently been about to sit for breakfast, except that there were 2 trays set out, 2 chairs, and 2 steaming cups of dark liquid. "Pretty mystical," said Dunstan. "Ancient secret of the Orient. Multiple coffee awareness." Adcox arrived, trailed by Billie and Jones. Wilks turned to her. "Get everyone in here, now! We're expecting company." Tully was already working on the airlock. Falk had stepped back into the corridor to help the others bring in the equipment. Wilks looked at Ripley and saw the same question on her face that he felt on his own. How much time? Billie ran into the workroom. Falk shut the door behind her, and Carvey crouched to the floor with a welder. Light too bright to look at flashed. Carvey quickly melted part of the heavy plastic door to the frame, and then stepped back. Moto unpacked one of the carbines and pointed it at the now jammed entry. Tully tapped in codes at the airlock. "Come on," said Ripley, jaw tight. Okay, said Tully, almost to herself. "And... got it!" The airlock door slid open. Tully unplugged her portable and ran the few steps to the hatch of the Kurtz. She hooked the portable to the new hatch. McQuaid stepped in after her. The others looked tensed, ready to rush in. Behind them, the door mechanism to the D6 entry buzzed. It buzzed again, longer this time. The sound edged with a high-pitched mechanical whine. It could have only been a second or two, but it seemed a lot longer. Then someone pounded at the door. "Diesler!" called a female voice, muffled through the thick plastic. "Hey! Open up!" The man on the floor groaned slightly and rolled his head to one side. Diesler, apparently. Moto pointed her weapon at him, but he didn't move again. Ripley turned to look at Wilks, but he was already headed to the entryway. The pounding continued. "You asshole! This shit's getting cold! Open up!" Wilks punched the entry button. The mechanism whined again, but the door remained closed. "Hold on!" shouted Wilks. "Door's stuck!" There was a pause. Ripley gritted her teeth and hoped that Wilks sounded at least remotely like the unconscious worker. "Well, no shit," said the woman on the other side. "Come on, Wonder Tech, fix the goddamn thing. My breakfast is dying out here." Ripley could see the crew members relax a little. Wilks had just bought them a little time. Tully stopped typing and motioned for McQuaid to step forward. A quiet computerized voice came from the monitor at face level. "Command pilot, please enter vocal access code now." "McQuaid, Eric D, Captain. A7050B, he said. "Thank you." Tully input the final code, a grin spreading across her face. With a triumphant flourish, she pressed enter. Ripley grinned, almost there. Nothing happened. "Invalid code. Access denied. Please enter new code now." Wilks picked up the tool that Diesler had dropped and stared at it. It was some kind of computer hookup, an oblong box with several conductors and prongs on one side. The woman called impatiently from the other side. "Come on, Diesler, or I'm going to sit on the fucking floor and eat it all. Yours too. Don't tell me you did this to the door all by yourself while I was gone." Wilks looked at the box in his hand and stopped. Of course. Diesler! Say something! The woman sounded suspicious now. What are you doing anyway? You beating off in there or something? Just a sec, said Wilks. I'm trying the code on this one. It would have to hold her. He turned and ran, as quietly as he could, back to the airlock. I don't have any new codes, said Tully. This is it. They must have changed them since yesterday. The crew stood around her, tense. Can we blow the door? Said Jones. Not without alarms, said Falk. The big man looked angry. And that wouldn't do us much good, to have a big fucking hole in our escape ship. Billie felt despair rise inside her. To be stopped by a fucking door. Wilks shoved past her and handed a box to Tully. Plug this in, he said. Quick! She grabbed it and jammed the conductor into the opening on her portable. Ripley looked at Wilks. What? New access codes. Got to be. The General is more paranoid than we thought. The hatch of the Kurtz popped open. McQuaid and Ripley strapped themselves in at the console while the others moved around behind them, preparing for flight. Wilks stood next to the two pilots. With any luck, the female tech hadn't alerted anyone yet. If she had, they would be thoroughly fucked. As McQuaid punched the disengaged controls, a voice crackled out over the intercom. Kurtz pilot, identify yourself, please. This is Captain Eric McQuaid. And who is this? He spoke gruffly, impatiently. Sir, this is Lieutenant Dunn, sir, of the Kirkland. Please state purpose and authorization, sir. Operation Arrowhead, said McQuaid. He sounded bored. Access P21402. General Peters' code. There was a pause. Sir, we have no mission scheduled from this sector. Dunn sounded very young and very nervous. Could you please wait while I raise the General, sir? Jesus Christ! Peters schedules another bug hunt without telling some dumb shit lieutenant, and now we have to wait until you drag him out of bed to okay it again. Think, son. Why would we want to go on this trip? For fun? McQuaid paused. Fine, go ahead, but you better hope the General is in a good mood, Lieutenant. There was another pause, and Dunn spoke again, obviously cowed. I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead. Access cleared and verified. Good luck, sir. Wilks and Ripley grinned at one another, and Wilks slapped McQuaid on the back. From behind them, Wilks could hear the others laughing. He walked back to strap himself in, feeling vaguely sorry for Lieutenant Dunn. By the time he got hold of the General for verification, they'd be way out of range. And there would be hell to pay for it. Too bad. Billie smiled at him when he sat down. Score 1 for the good guys, she said. He adjusted his seat before he answered. That was the easy part. She nodded, and her smile faltered slightly. Wilks leaned his head against the back of his chair and let out a deep breath. They were in it all the way now.